Kia Sonet or Mahindra Thar? If you think this is the comparison test, well, join the club, because a lot of us here in the office do think that this is quite silly. Why are we wasting our time? After all, who in their right minds with a compact SUV on the shortlist and the Sonet right at the top of that shortlist will actually consider something like the Mahindra Thar? But then again, is it actually that silly? A lot of you guys on our social media have asked us whether y'all should be looking at either the Sonet or the Thar, and that's where this idea came from you guys. And like always, we are here to help, because the Evo India channel is all about the enthusiast, even if the test looks a bit silly. So before we go ahead, don't forget to smash that bell icon, and if you like this video, why not give us a thumbs up and also share this video. Right then, so now let's get going, and I will obviously start with the Sonet because
you've been doing lots of videos of late. I'll handle it, don't worry.
Okay, so then I'll start with the Mahindra Thar and...
No Thar, chill, we'll handle it.
All right.
Now we're going to be putting Thar and the Sonet against each other in a couple of tests, and the first one of them is accessibility. As you can see, you've got a fairly large door aperture, and climbing in isn't too difficult because the floor isn't too high. So you can just step in very easily, and once you're inside, it's fairly straightforward in here. You've got a seat which is adjustable for height, as well as the backrest, and you can slide it forward on rails as well. The steering wheel, it's adjustable only for height and not reach, but otherwise it's fairly straightforward. It's very simple, very easy to get into, nothing complicated here. It's just what you want from a daily driver.
Getting into the Thar isn't easy if you get in like this. But as boss showed on his Instagram, if you use the footboard for leverage, then getting in is pretty easy. Also, the door aperture is good, and that helps. Once you're on the inside, the seating position is very commanding. The seats are adjustable for height. The steering is adjustable for rake and not reach. So getting in is not very difficult. But if you have knee or back problems, then you have to be extra careful. But the real difference is when you get in the back.
And to show you just how much of a difference, we're going to be doing it against the clock. We're going to be timing how long it takes us to get into the back seat, starting from here and stopping when we strap in. You got the timer ready?
Yes.
Awesome. 3, 2, 1, go. And that's time. It's fairly straightforward. If you look at the door aperture, it is slightly narrow, but that's the nature of cars in this segment. The sub 4 meter cars, they do have small door apertures, so you just got to be a little careful while getting in, but it's not too difficult. In terms of knee room, the Sonet's got adequate knee room. It's not the most spacious car in this class, but it does just fine. You've got plenty of headroom though. In overall, the back seat, it is pretty comfortable. You've got a nice soft seat, you've got a nice large window which you can roll down, and overall, it's a pleasant place to be. Now let's see how long it takes Suvrat in the Thar.
To get to the back of the Thar, you have to come to the passenger side seat because there's a lever that slides the seat forward. Now we are going to time this as well. Do you have the timer ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's go. So there's a lever over here that slides the seat forward. Now getting in is a bit tricky. You have to make some effort. But once you're in, it's quite comfortable. There you go. But once you're in, there's ample knee room, there's ample headroom, the seats are comfortable, but there's a wheel well over here. So it's strictly a 4-seater and not a 5-seater.
It took Suvrat twice, more than twice, the amount of time to get into the backseat than I took to get into the Sonet. And Suvrat's only 5'7". He's not particularly tall. So if you're a tall guy, you're going to find it a little harder. I think it's agreed then that the Sonet wins this round. So the Thar, it may not be easy to get into, but what it does have is a lot of appeal. And we've got a few young enthusiasts here to tell us which car they prefer. Okay guys, if you all could pick one key, yeah, either the Thars or the Sonnets, which one would it be? Which one would you pick?
This one.
Thar. You? Thar. Thar. You? Sonnet. Yeah, you? Thar. Thar. So out of the 6 guys here, 5 of them have picked the Thar and 1 of them has picked the Sonnet. And that just shows the amount of emotional appeal and how cool the Thar really is. Cars at the end of the day, they're emotional objects. You have to feel special when you get into them. And the Thar, it does that. Don't you agree?
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah. Now when it comes to performance, a drag race is the easiest way to find out which one is quicker. But in addition to lining them up at the drag strip, we're going to drive them around a few corners to see how they behave as well.
To keep this fair, we're both driving the diesel automatic variants of both these cars. The Thar, it gets the 2-litre turbo diesel, which makes 130 bhp and 320 Newton meters of torque. The Sonet, on the other hand, it makes 113 bhp and 250 Newton meters of torque. So clearly, the Thar has the bigger engine, it makes more power and more torque. But it's also heavier. So let's go and check out how this turns.
Right, so Thar versus Sonet, which one's going to win? I honestly have no idea. Generally, when we have 2 cars lining up at the grid, I have some sort of idea about which one's going to be ahead. Today, no clue. Regular drag racing stuff, so I'm going to put the AC off. I'm going to put traction control off, get into sport mode, and I'm ready. Right, 3, 2, 1, go! Okay, he's got a good start, I've also got a good start, and we're neck and neck right now. But I'm slightly inching ahead of him. Slightly, just ever so slightly. Yep, so off the line, it's pretty much equal. But then as speed rises, the Sonet has the upper hand.
Now, driving is not just about straight line speeds. How a car goes around corners matters a lot, especially to enthusiasts. Now, the new Thar, it has coil springs, so the leaf springs on the old Thar, they're long gone. And the coil springs make a world of difference in the way the Thar behaves on the road. It's very planted, it's very stable, and it's very comfortable at the same time. Now, before tackling corners in the older Thar, you had to think twice, you had to make calculated moves. But in the new Thar, you can be a little more enthusiastic. You can push a little further. You can go faster. And that's mainly down to the solid grip that this chassis provides. The tires are good. The feedback from the steering is good. The steering is not overly light. It's not lifeless. It has some heft to it, and that certainly helps when you're going faster. So the Thar, yes, it can do cornering, but don't overcook it. If you go beyond the limits, then you might get caught out. You need to know where to push and where not to push. But all in all, yes, the answer is the Thar can go around corners. It is an enthusiast car.
The new Thar, it may be fun around corners, but the Sonet, it's funner. The Thar, it has a body on frame construction. The Sonet has a monocoque, and monocoques are inherently better and more composed in such situations. The Sonet, well, it's proven its worth. It is incredibly capable. We put it up against its rivals like the Venue and the EcoSport not too long ago, and it won that comparison test. That is because of how well it behaves on the roads and in the corners, in addition to many other things. But yeah, the behavior in the Benz is one of the highlights of this car in general, not just in comparison to the Thar. The steering, it feels direct, it feels sharp. Sure, there's not much by way of feedback, but the front end feels positive. It feels like it wants to listen to you and dive into corners. You can control the car confidently. The suspension too works well. On flat surfaces, it helps you grip. On really bumpy surfaces, it absorbs the ruts well, even when you're cornering hard and putting lateral loads through the chassis. If your definition of the thrill of driving is going rapidly around corners, then between these two, the Sonet should be your pick.
Now the Sonet goes really well around corners, but the Thar isn't that bad either. But there's something that the Thar can do really well where the Sonet won't even come close, and that's off-roading. The Thar is equipped with a lot of off-roading kit, and that includes a 4x4 system, locking differential, and also a low-range gearbox. In fact, when the tarmac ends, the Thar's journey just begins. It can go over rocks, slush, mud, and a few weeks ago we even took it to the Thar desert where we had a lot of fun dune bashing. But Atish, what can the Sonet do?
Well, the Sonet, it's called a compact SUV. But honestly, it can't do too many SUV things. The most it can manage is maybe a light trail, which is hard-packed. If it's soft, it'll probably sink. But yeah, I'm not going to take it where you take the Thar. I'll probably end up with ripped-off bumpers. The Thar, it wins the off-roading round. There's no doubt about that. Now we're going to test the ride quality of these two cars very scientifically with a glass of water. Much like we tested the new Thar against the old Thar, we're going to fill a glass of water to the brim, drive it over a bad road and see which one spills less water. Right, so simple test. There's a bad patch of road. I've got a full glass of water. It's filled to the brim and we're going to see which car drops less water. The car which has more water in the end of the glass at the end of it wins. It's that simple. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Let's do this. I don't want to wet my pants, so drive properly. And immediately there's water spilling, but that's because the water is right till the top. Once it lowers its level a little bit, I'm hoping the spillage will be less.
Well, I'm trying to drive as smooth as I can.
Well, you aren't doing too good a job, but yeah, that's the nature of the Thar. Yeah, it does transfer a little bit more off the road into the cabin.
But now you have to keep in mind that the Thar gets coil springs. So compared to the old Thar which had leaf springs, the ride quality on this new Thar has improved massively. So on this bad patch of road, you can absolutely go flat out. In fact, just because there's traffic right now, so we're going slow, but the ride is very confidence inspiring. And due to that long travel suspension, it can handle the larger bumps and potholes really well. In fact, even on the road, the new Thar has improved a lot. Now, the team went to Rajasthan, to the Thar desert in two Thars, and the on-road experience was really good. They were really comfortable throughout the journey. But yeah, again, it's a ladder frame chassis. So over larger bumps and potholes on the road, you have to be careful because you end up being tossed around a bit. But that's a very minor downside to this. Overall, it's a great car to drive on a daily basis.
Yeah, it is something you can genuinely live with. Sure, it's not going to give you the same levels of comfort as a car, but it's nearly there, yeah? I mean, we're halfway through our trail and I've spilled so much water, which isn't too bad, honestly. We've got our results. The Thar has waterproof interiors, right?
Yes.
It does, right? So we can do a little bit of cheating. But yeah, just to give you an idea, the Thar did kick up some amount of water. Now we're going to have to repeat this whole exercise in the Sonet to see how it fares. Let's head there. Okay, so now we're going to repeat the same test over the same patch of road in the Kia Sonet. Surat, you got your full glass of water?
Yes, there's the full glass of water.
Awesome. Cool. Let's see how this goes. So the Sonet's ride quality, it's set up a little bit on the firmer side. But when it comes to overall comfort, even in the city or on the highway, you will find yourself more comfortable in the Sonet. It absorbs bumps a little bit better. On the highway, it feels more planted and more stable. It feels more confidence inspiring. And the Thar, it just tends to jiggle around a little more. However, the Sonet doesn't have the same robustness as the Thar. It doesn't have the same amount of travel in its suspension. It doesn't have the same robustness to its chassis by virtue of being a monocoque compared to the body on frame on the Thar, and you can feel that. You can't hammer through these roads in the same way that you would hammer through them on a Thar. On the Thar, you can just put your foot down and fly. You don't even have to slow down for trails like these. But on the Sonet, you've got to just ease it into bumps. So you've got to ease it into a ditch, ease it out of a ditch. You've got to be a little careful and you have to basically treat it a little gingerly. And that's when the Sonet really stays comfortable.
The low speed ride on the Sonet is clearly more comfortable because, as you can see, again we went through the same patch of road in the Thar, and in the Sonet you can see the water spill is much lesser.
Yeah, so the Thar, what it does is it jiggles around a little bit, and you feel that in the cabin. It's not fully settled over roads like these. You will feel it jiggle about a bit, jump around a bit. Now it's much better than the old leaf spring Thar. That rear suspension really used to kick you, but here it's much better. But still, compared to a car like the Sonet, the Thar still isn't quite there yet. And that's a compromise you make for everything else that the package offers you. Now, we've reached the end of our trail. Just to be sure, we're just going to put this glass up against the Thar's glass and see how much of a difference it makes.
On the left is the Thars and on the right is the Sonets. And side by side, it was clear that the Sonet won this round. It can't take the same abuse that the Thar can, but when it comes to keeping the passengers comfortable, it rises up to the occasion without a fuss.
So one thing we noticed when we were on our drive to Rajasthan was the amount of wind noise in the Thar. Now it's significantly better in the hard top than in the soft top. The soft top you pretty much need earplugs, but even in the hard top, at higher speeds, you can hear a fair amount of wind buffeting. That's what we're going to find out in a completely unscientific manner. Now, we've got a dB meter, but it's on the phone, so it's not going to be entirely accurate, but we're going to be using the same apparatus in both the Sonet as well as the Thar. So it should give us an indication of the difference in the NVH levels between the two cars at 100 kilometers an hour. Suvi, you've got the phone?
I have the phone. The dB meter is ready.
Cool. So we're up at 100 and just see what your levels are.
So the peak decibels that we are getting is 70.4.
Okay, so that's a good benchmark we have now for the Sonet. Let's head over to the Thar and see what the differences are. So we're done with the Sonet and now we're going to try it with the Thar. Surat, what's the reading you're getting?
So we are getting 72.7 decibels in the Thar.
Right, so 72.7 versus 70.4, right?
Right.
That's not too much of a difference. So at 100 kilometers an hour, the Thar is not that much louder than a Sonet, which is great. Where the Thar really gets loud is above 120, 130. And you're not legally allowed to do those speeds in our country anyway. So wind noise in a hardtop Thar is not something you really need to be worried about. So now let's take stock of the features that these cars have. We're going to be awarding 1 point for every useful feature they have. We're going to be deducting half a point for every useless feature they have.
The Thar gets everything that you expect a modern SUV to be equipped with. It gets cruise control, it gets climate control, there's a tire pressure monitoring system, there's also a touchscreen with Android Auto, Apple CarPlay and also Bluetooth. It also gets parking sensors, however, there's no parking camera, so for that we'll only award it half a point.
Meanwhile, the Sonet comes packed and loaded with features. You get the obvious stuff, so you have your touchscreen with navigation, you have automatic climate control, but you also have connected car features, you have ventilated seats, you have 6 airbags, reverse parking camera, so 1 whole point for that, and you have a wireless phone charger. But I'm going to deduct 1 point because the Sonet, it gets traction modes, and traction modes on a front wheel drive car, they don't really make sense. It's more of a gimmick than anything else.
Well, those are a lot of features that Sonet gets, but the Thar has just scored 4 stars at the global NCAP crash test, and safety being so important in India, we are going to award it 2 points. But the Sonet, it hasn't been tested at the global NCAP yet, so we are not going to deduct or award it any points in this regard.
There can't be any winners and losers here. The Thar, we absolutely love it. There was a time when the Thar was so hardcore that it appealed only to that lunatic fringe of hardcore off-roaders. This one, it doesn't do that. It appeals to a far broader audience. In fact, this is a car that you can live with on a daily basis. I'd go so far to say as this is a car that can be your only car if you're willing to live with a few compromises. Like the fact that you can't hear your passenger at highway speeds, or the boot isn't really usable if you've got the rear seats flipped up. The Sonet, on the other hand, is more practical, it's more sensible, it's more comfortable. It comes packed with features, it's quiet on the highway, it's everything you'd expect of a regular, small family car. Which one should you pick? That's for you to decide. Are you the sort of person who has a bit of an adventure streak in you? Go for the Thar. You won't regret it. If you want something sensible, comfortable, quiet, go for the Sonet. Either way, you'll be living the good life.
Subscribe to the Evo India channel and hit the bell icon to keep pace with the thrill of driving.